Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the inaugural tinyisbeautiful.com webinar. Jake, Dominic, and Tracy are here. And on your screen, you're probably seeing Dominic first. So Dominic, hello and welcome.
Thanks, Steve. It's good to be here. My name is Dominic. I'm from Jamaica Cottage Shop, and I am in southern Vermont.
You did a perfect job there. Jake, would you do the same? Tell us who you are, your affiliation, and where you are.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Jake from the Tiny Nest Project. My girlfriend Kiva and I we make a YouTube series about building our own tiny house, and we have a website, and we're just trying to produce sort of tiny house resources for the DIY community.
Yeah, awesome. And Tracy, we don't see you, but we're going to hear you.
Hi, this is Tracy Powell. I'm from Simply Tiny, and I've designed and built my own tiny house, and I just offer consulting to other people doing the same now for a hobby.
Okay, we're going to put all this in the show notes, but if you're interested at this moment, so Dominic is JamaicaCottageShop.com, Jake is TinyNestProject.com, and Tracy is SimplyTiny.com. Okay, so the background here is that we went to the Tiny House Jamboree in Colorado this summer, and I felt like I really noticed two different camps. There was the DIY camp, the sort of speakers, the people who had brought their own homes, and then there were the commercial builders. Am I right in feeling like there's a little bit of a separation taking place?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely some crossover, and just the general nature of the tiny house movement allows for that crossover, but there is definitely a separation in sort of when people come into the movement, which direction they're going to go, if they're going to go sort of pre-built or if they're going to sort of tackle it themselves.
Dominic,
yeah,
go ahead.
I do agree with that. You can definitely see the commercial side of it, and then as well as the folks that are ambitious enough to take on the project by themselves. As far as I really tend towards that commercial side. That's pretty obvious from where I am, but I am set up to help those DIYers. I'm the one that will definitely guide them and give them as much or as little help as they request.
Yeah, it feels like you're pretty much a bridge between the two.
That is true. So if they just want the plans, we can offer just the plans. If they'd like us to prepare the shell and then have them finish it off, that's a very frequent, common question, and we do that quite often. But then again, we'll make it turnkey, and so if you'd like that project to be brought to a full completion, we're here to ready to do that for you.
Nice. Tracy, what about you?
Yeah, for me, actually, it's kind of been a hobby. I'm very, very happy at the architectural consulting job that I've had my career for over 15 years. So when I built my own tiny house, I've started helping others do the same. But I've worked in the building industry for so many years, so I try to convince people it's worth it to hire a builder and maybe not learn how to build something off of YouTube and possibly hurt themselves. So even though I'm on the DIY side of things, I'm trying to convince everyone to go in the other direction.
Jake, it sounded like you were going to jump in there.
Oh, I was, well, when Dominic was speaking there, like we went to the Tiny House Jamboree as well and spoke with numerous builders there. And I think right now anyway, it seems like a lot of the builders are in the same position of being sort of halfway, which is good because of the nature of the movement. There's a lot of customization, like every inch counts in a tiny house. So it seems like that's kind of the nature of it, essentially, is a customization, but also the ability to have someone design it for you.
So from where I sit, the first question that people are asking me, or that I'm watching people ask, is really around the money, right? So and if you're a commercial builder, clearly you've got to make enough money to stay viable, to keep doing what you're doing. And if you're a DIYer, you may be trying to do it yourself because you're trying to save money. So, Dominic, what advice do you give people about the money side?
Be realistic on that budget. Understand what it is that you're after. What can you not live without? What is the maybe the 3 or 5 things that you can't live without? If running water is one of them, that budget should be boosted up a little.
I mean, if we're talking actual dollars here, Dominic, what do you say to somebody who says, I just have to be as inexpensive as possible? How much could I build a tiny house for?
You know, not very fond of the word cheap, but I hear it constantly. It's not the right word. If the right word would be affordable. And I took a call this morning. It was a very good call. It was very $15,000. He says, that's my budget. I want flushing toilet, running water. I'm going to be tied into the municipality. And see, that's the line where they feel very confident that they can afford 10 to 15,000. When it gets to the realistic budget of it, it's more like 35 to 50,000 is much more realistic budget on the commercial side of being able to produce and offer to the public and get them the financing that they need. If we go on above 50,000, then that's a pretty nice house, and it really does have a lot of the amenities and some of the bells and whistles that we all enjoy.
Jake, are you kind of open about what it costs you to build your home and what you tell people?
Yeah. A lot of people are interested in knowing how much ours costs, having done it ourselves. Right now, we're sitting at about, I should start by saying our projected amount was 20-ish, which was literally just a shot in the dark value based on what we were reading about, because there was less tiny house content out there at the time when we were researching and preparing. So then we were like, well, let's go say 25 should be a reasonable amount. And so right now we're sitting at about 30, and we're mostly done. There's definitely a couple thousand worth of stuff that we need to put into it. But so that's entirely materials and appliances and equipment and everything. Zero labor time calculated into that because we've done everything ourselves. And we feel like we bought everything, all the materials new, like we didn't reclaim anything. And we have been splurging on a number of things. So that's kind of on the high end. Like if we just wanted to build a shell that was just very basic, meant to be off-grid, no complex systems or anything, I'm sure it could do it for a lot less. And the other thing I was going to comment there about reclaim stuff is that it seems like people either have a lot of money or a lot of time. And if you have a lot of time to spend seeking out reclaimed materials and gathering up stuff on the cheap, you can build something for very little. But that's not the case for everyone. So there's kind of a balance that you have to reach there, right?
So Tracy, we have a woman in our area who spoke to our meetup group last week, and she did her tiny house as a her senior project in college. And it's a very nice tiny house, but she did all the work with her boyfriend and his grandfather. And she spent $13,000. When you hear those numbers, well, how do you react? Is that just not the case for most people?
Well, it really depends what part of the country we all live in. I mean, I happen to be in the Boston area, so it's a pretty highly priced area. But I spent almost $70,000 in just materials alone on my tiny house, 150 square feet. But I designed it, I collaborated with about 30 different engineers and building experts to build my home, and we really did try to meet as many codes as possible, even though none truly exist for all these structures on wheels. Those of us that are building the tiny homes on the wheels. So we felt collectively as engineers and designers in the industry, like some of our guys on the design team were in the industry for over 30 years, and they really felt like you could not build a safe tiny house that met codes for less than 30,000. You'd really be cutting a lot of corners and deviating from a lot of standards that have been in place for decades.
So Dominic, a lot of people feel like they just don't have any of the skills to do something themselves. I mean, in some ways, that's kind of the result of sort of a larger cultural education issue, right? But they don't feel like they leave school with the capability to do a project this big on their own. Can most people do this?
Most people can if they have the determination. As far as that skill level goes, yes, I have a lot of folks that come to visit me who would like to participate and go out into production and be able to work with my carpenters. Unfortunately, that's not a very viable case to be able to produce a home for somebody when they're standing right there. It's a little bit different when we're in production. We're not running a school, but we do have a very big audience who would love to come and join us and work and try to do that themselves. The folks who do feel confident, go ahead and start bringing some of the parts and pieces. Another example this morning, we got an email. A guy sends us a picture of his trailer, brand new trailer, and he would like to see a kit or just some sort of help and guidance in getting it moving forward. That's a very frequent situation. They feel confident that they can get to the shell, but we kind of guide them and educate them for weight, restrictions on width and height, as well as when it comes down to the mechanicals, we definitely recommend seeking out a professional for the gas, electric, and some of those things there that really have a lot of codes and regulations.
Jake, for you, how much was this about the money and how much of this was about actually doing it yourself?
I mean, to follow up on what Dominic was saying there, like I think there's a wide variety of levels of confidence in, like, there's a lot of people who are interested in tiny houses, and you got from people like us who are ready to dive in and do anything and everything and learn everything ourselves. Then you've got people who need some guidance, and then there's people that just don't even want to get involved at all, right? And so for us, we felt like, I don't know if I mentioned this at any point, but I'm an electrician, so I have got some trades experience. I've never done any plumbing or gas or framed anything or anything, but I was in a position where I felt confident enough to tackle everything. And so with that already being the case, it was kind of a no-brainer that we would just save money on any labor and just do everything ourselves. So it was definitely a bonus to approach it that way and save all that money on labor. But there's also something to be said for the satisfaction of knowing that you've done it all yourself and really knowing your house. Like, I know every piece of every stud, I know every crevice of every wall, and I know what's in there. And if we need to make any changes or do any maintenance or anything, it's we've got that as well, that side of things.
And Tracy, for you, there's this minimalism piece too. How does the DIY and the tiny and the minimalism all tie together for you?
Well, I grew up in RVs, so I've lived tiny for the majority of my entire life now. I'm in my late 30s, and so I've never really owned a whole lot of stuff. I never really accumulated a whole lot of stuff. I never really wanted to or tried to, so it wasn't hard. I didn't really have to downsize much to get into the tiny house. It was just a matter of living in a structure that was on wheels instead of a solid structure that was pretty small already. So yeah, the minimalism definitely played a huge part. And then, the DIY is since I did build my own home with my brother, who was actually also a licensed electrician, we built it together. We helped our parents build homes while we were growing up. So if we ever need to make any changes to my tiny house, we'll know where everything is and we'll be able to modify it.
Nice. Okay, so Dominic, one of the things that comes out from hearing you talk is that you probably have to be very patient every day with people's expectations for what they think they're going to be able to accomplish and sort of the reality. So what's the kind of the sort of common package message that you end up giving people about, what are the challenges that you don't expect that you really need to be thinking about?
How often do you plan on moving your house? That's one of our first questions that we ask. So it really tells us, are we going to be following RV codes, or are we going to be following more traditional household codes? So most people will only move their house maybe once, twice. The younger folks want that freedom and mobility. The older folks just want to be able to be in an affordable situation and limit the tax burden, where some folks actually want to travel the country and use it as a recreational vehicle, be able to move it every night and sleep in a different place. So when somebody comes to me and starts telling me that they want a living situation, we're going to ask them a whole list of questions. Where's the fresh water going to come from? What are we going to do with the wastewater? And that all goes back to how often we're going to move the building.
Yeah, if I could ask, I'm just curious if you have a ballpark on like the percentage of people who are really interested in doing that heavy travel versus just less, either no moving or very infrequent moving.
1 out of 10 might want to go on a frequent journeys, where probably 90% of folks are simply looking for a solution now, and then maybe in the future it'll change. They're really looking to see that the building be only moved maybe once or twice and have that freedom to do so if they want.
Thanks for that question, Jake. And I'll follow up with another one, Dominic. What percentage of people who contact you do you think actually follow through and either have you build a tiny house or build their own, or somewhere in between?
I would think most of them go forward. We're working on a situation now where we can get funding for everybody. That is one of the major holdups, is that they're unable to achieve the financing to get the project moving. So we're working right now with several different companies around the country to be able to implement that. And as you drop into the shopping cart, be able to click and have funding right away to feel confident that you can afford the situation. It has been difficult for many different walks of life, from millennials all the way up to the baby boomers, to be able to find a situation where they can feel confident in that affordability and be able to get the traditional bank loans have not been very cooperative. If the funding is not a obstacle, then we're moving forward in a nice, easy fashion and coming up, determining a budget. We're working back and forth, formulating the floor plan, and then working out the details of, say, the siding and the roofing materials, and working closely of where we're going to have the heat, what is going to be the source of power to heat the water, how comfortable are we going to make the house.
Dominic, you're doing a really good job. I just want to come in and have you do it, right? It's like, okay, this is a guy I would trust. Jake, how many of the people that you talk to do you think end up feeling like they can move forward? I mean, Dominic says everybody who comes, they're able to do it.
Well, I think when you're at a point where you're actually contacting a builder, you're definitely at an advanced stage in your interest in actually making a tiny house part of your life. For us, we're kind of way at an earlier stage, most of the people we come in contact with, because, well, for one, we don't really come into direct contact with a lot of people because we exist mostly online with our YouTube series showing us building our house. So we've got a lot of people who are just getting interested. They see our channel and they say, oh, here's a couple of people doing it themselves. What's that like? And that was the whole purpose of making these YouTube videos, is to show we're just random people. We don't have any background in tiny houses or really building, other than the limited electrical experience I have. So like, this is what it's really like to tackle it as just complete amateurs, basically. So we get people checking that out, and then we get lots of questions and just random. It's a broad spectrum of people who are watching it. So we've definitely had some people get in touch with us and say, oh, hey, I liked your videos. Hey, by the way, we're building our tiny house. Here's some pictures. And so there are people out there. It's really hard to say like what percentage or anything like that. But there's definitely people who have kept up with us and shown us their project. And it's really interesting to see everything that's out there with what people are doing.
So Tracy, sort of same question. Dominic's painted this picture that I love of, if you really want to do this, there's going to be a way to do it. In your experience with people that you're meeting, how many are actually feeling comfortable and confident moving forward?
I think I might even be in a more earlier stage of people that I've talked to from across the whole entire country that are just in the very, very, very beginning stages of exploring the lifestyle, and they may not even move forward. So I've only seen probably less than 10% of the people I've even talked to or met as friends that are thinking about living tiny, about maybe 10% that actually move forward with living tiny. And then I've met a lot of people up here in the Northeast. We can't afford land in this area. The land costs normally far more than the cost of any structure of any size that we would put on that piece of land. So up here in the Northeast, there are quite a few of us that actually do build our tiny homes. And we talk and hang out in our meetup groups and everything like you were saying. So I don't know. I don't meet a lot of them in advance of them buying their house or building their house. The people that I meet early on are the ones that are just kind of lightly thinking about the concept and exploring it.
Yep, that's something that we always ask. Where are you in your research? How far along are you in researching the project? And one of the main questions we ask, besides how often you want to move your house, is, do you own land? Well, usually the topic turns to is where wastewater goes, what a septic system is, what a perk test is, and understanding what it takes to live on a piece of land in a legal fashion to meet code standards.
Yeah, there's a lot of little details that I think might be commonly overlooked, like the realities of hooking up to utilities and like where the wastewater is going, like Dominic was saying, that there's definitely an element of fantasy with the tiny house living. Like you see tiny house tours and you're like, oh, look at this beautiful, simple life. And I think there needs to be a little bit more of that, the reality out there, and make sure people are at an early stage really looking into those details.
So there are these. Go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, well, I was going to say, I was not coming from the side of it where I couldn't afford to buy a house. I have a pretty good job, and that was definitely an option open to me. It's just that I didn't want to live out in the middle of the woods or on a big, huge, empty piece of land with no one around me. So, so that I decided to stay in the RV parks that I kind of grew up in, and I always have neighbors that are nearby for, and a lot of that is really for safety reasons. Humans have kind of lived in clusters and closer together for many, many years. And those of us that have lived in apartment buildings know that, we're safer in a bigger, larger building closer to other humans than out in the middle of, say, 10 acres of empty land. So, yeah, that romanticized notion of living out in the middle of the woods is not, it's not really as safe as it cracks up to be. But also, I think people's level of happiness is not quite as high because they're just not around anyone else.
Okay, so there are these different models of change, right? And one that it's been described to me is that it's the becoming a marathon runner. That typically you have to have a buddy or somebody who says, okay, these are the shoes to buy, come out and train with me. We'll start running a mile, and then we'll run 2 miles, and then you ultimately have somebody running the race with you. Is building a tiny home kind of like that? Do you need to have that level of support? Dominic, we'll start with you.
It can be a challenge to bring it to a completion. We don't build enough tiny houses to have our own electrician on staff, our own plumber, our own. We oftentimes spray foam them. So we're bringing in all these different contractors, and we're acting as a general contractor on our own, putting together and bringing all the pieces together. So when you're talking about a marathon, yes, we have a set confirmation, acknowledgement, production has the go-ahead, and then we give the delivery date. When can you pick up your tiny house, or when is it going to be delivered? So we have that deadline. So when you're talking about a marathon, we're very conscious about bringing that job to a completion and being conscious of that time frame.
Jake, do you need a buddy?
Well, in our case,
a video buddy.
We're 2 people, so having a a pair of people really helped keep things moving.
Did you have somebody who had done it before to kind of help you, or somebody? I mean, you're an electrician, so you had some experience.
Not really. We did attend like a tumbleweed workshop early on, and we went on a little pilgrimage to Portland, Oregon, to the Tiny House Hotel. That was actually the first tiny house we set foot in was there, because we were like, well, we better before we move forward and start spending money and building and whatnot, we better actually make sure that we like the feel of a tiny house. But I was going to comment that I think one of the appeals of the tiny house thing is that it is achievable for one person, or in our case, a couple, if you have enough dedication. I think, as was mentioned earlier, it's possible to go from nothing and do the design, or you might buy plans or whatever, but you can take those steps by yourself and reach completion, and it's achievable. If you think about building a full-size house as one or two people, doing all the research, like being your own contractor, buying all the materials and actually building it like a full-size house yourself, it seems wildly overwhelming. But building a tiny house isn't, and it's been proven time and time again that an individual person or a couple can do it quite easily. So I think that's part of the appeal. But I could just think to round back to the question, I think it definitely did help in our case having a partner, being two people, not only for the work, like the physical work, having two sets of hands, but also just playing off each other for the design and sort of staying motivated and sort of working towards a life together, since we're a couple.
Now, Tracy, we know how you're going to answer this question, right?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, I couldn't have built my tiny house without my brother alongside of me, and then our father as well, kind of jumping in and helping us. But honestly, I think for safety alone, I mean, I keep mentioning safety and security and all that because I've known people that have gotten hurt on job sites, and these are experts that have been in the building industry for 30, 40 years. Accidents happen, and no one intends to hurt themselves, and no one intends to build a structure that's unsafe for other people in the future to live in. But accidents do just kind of statistically happen. So every single person I talk to that's going to build a tiny house or even hire someone to build a tiny house, I always encourage them to have several different advocates and consultants and mentors to help them through the process, because it's what you don't know that could either harm you or harm someone else, or just create a situation that no one wants to exist. I mean, I'm going to park next to someone that builds their tiny home after watching YouTube videos, and the walls are fire rated, so hopefully if theirs catches fire, I won't be hurt for a period of time, but nobody intends to get hurt. It's just better safe than sorry. And every project is 80% thought and process and research and 20% execution. So it's well worth putting your time into that 80%.
Okay, so
I think it's more dangerous to. I was just going to comment quickly that I think it's more dangerous to think you know something and not know it than to know that you don't know it and either learn it or get someone who does know it to get involved to right that wrong.
Yep.
Just enough to be dangerous.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the three of you are going to answer this question differently, but I come to you and I say, hey, I want to do this myself. I want the experience of building for myself. What's the first piece of advice that you give? What do I need to know from that moment?
Well, don't skip on your foundation. I have seen so many people try to buy a used trailer off the internet. Don't skip on the foundation. 2, understand where that fresh water and that wastewater is going to go. And 3, understand what it's going to take to run that for power. Electricity is a great source of power. And yes, you can get it from the sun and go solar and be off grid, but realistically, that could cost as much as the tiny house to run efficiently. That's for starters.
Did we lose Steve?
I'm back.
Oh,
Keep going. So I think, Dominic, did you finish? I lost you at the end there.
I did. I just was commenting on how solar can cost just as much as a tiny house to run an efficient system. Electricity is a great source of power to run the tiny house, and then understanding a thermostatic controlled heat or electricity for the air conditioning. Just understanding where that comes from is very important, rather than using wood or a different source that may not be adequate when you're not in the tiny house.
Thanks. Okay, Jake, what's your biggest piece of advice?
I'm thinking about it. I think I sort of almost just gave it in my last comment, which is that sort of know your limitations in terms of what you're gonna do yourself. I've sort of been going on the theme of you can do it, because obviously we did it all ourselves, so it's possible, but you really need to scrutinize every single thing that you're doing, and if you're not double, triple sure that you're doing it right, don't do it. Or get someone to help, basically, because I think sort of what Tracy's been pointing out is that it's really easy for someone to just dive in, think, oh, it's easy, and build something that's not safe in some way. So there's definitely the real possibility of that. I don't think it should scare people out of doing it, but there should be a healthy level of balance there between your own confidence and your ability to know where to draw the line and what you're capable of doing.
Tracy?
Yeah, what I would say, honestly, and every single person I talk to, is I say to them that, you may have once had in your mind that you need a job so that one day you can get this big giant house and this big giant piece of land. If you take that end goal or that objective out of the equation, what else do you want to do with your life? The tiny house, or a small house, or a mobile house, or just a plain old RV is just a means for you to reach the actual true goals that you really have. And your goal should not be a tiny house. Your end goal in mind should not be that, oh, I have a place to live. That should just be a means and a method for you to be able to reach whatever your real true life is going to be and whatever your real true goals are going to be. So when I answer that question to anybody, or I suggest it to somebody, it has very, very little to do with the house and a lot more to do with what all their other priorities are in life.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think people they have this epic goal, and then you end up spending your whole life trying to reach it. And the tiny house is supposed to be kind of a way of getting to that goal so that you can look at what's next. You haven't spent so much of your life reaching it that there's not enough time left. You get the tiny house, you have a comfortable home, you don't need to work towards that anymore. You can work towards something else that you're passionate about, maybe.
Okay, I think that's the perfect way to wrap up. Dominic, Jake, Tracy, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
That was lovely, very helpful. I'm Steve Hargadon, and this is our inaugural Tiny is Beautiful webinar. Thanks, everybody. Take care, and bye.
Bye-bye.